Hello, my name is LoG and welcome to another edition of LoG Tracks. Today's track will be the first track in the category that I call variation, meaning there will be at least one or more slight variations in the chord progression as the track runs. We will also be featuring a very popular and great sounding setup chord called a minor 4. Let's first listen to what this track sounds like. In this lesson, we will discuss at length the minor 4 chord and how you can use it and play over it with your leads or melodies. If you'd rather not hear me talk about anything for 30 minutes, feel free to click the link above now or below in the description to go right to the track. If you enjoy this type of instructional material, feel free to check out my Patreon at the link below. And now let's get on to the lesson. Okay, let's go over what this sound is and how it's used. What it is really simple. It's just literally what it's called, a minor 4 chord. So a 4 chord that is minor. So let me demonstrate this in the key of G. So G would be our 1. And what would be the 4? If we just simply walk up to the 4th of the key, that's the 4 chord. So 1, 2, 3, 4, or G, A, B, C. So a C chord would be the 4 chord in the key of G, and 4 chords are usually major. So if I played a 1 to a 4, that's G major to C major. But again, we are playing C minor as this new type of setup chord. So let me play this in a progression. I'm going to play 1, 5, 4, minor 4 in the key of G. So G is our 1, D is 5, C is 4, and then C minor is minor 4, right? So you can hear that setup quality that happens the moment I play that chord. So now let's talk about how we can use this. It's really, we already talked about, or I've already talked about how to use setup chords. It's really just to prepare your ears for the next thing. That thing could be a chord, the next section of the song, a different part of the song, whatever it is, that's what that chord can do. Or maybe you want to add some weight to some lyrical content that you have. You know, if there's a really important lyric, maybe line it up with that setup chord, the minor 4, to add some more impact to that lyric. There's a lot of ways you can do it, but we need to talk about how we can get out of this minor 4 chord, out of this setup chord. Where does it move after we play it? Now, like the other setup chords, there isn't really like a really hard rule that you have to move here. You can kind of go wherever you want, but typically the minor 4 chord does go to a couple locations. The first and most popular is back to the 1 chord. Okay, so let me play that same progression that I just played, but move to the 1 chord at the end. So 1, 5, 4, minor 4, and then the 1, right? That's the very typical usage of a minor 4. And the reason why, especially coming from the normal 4, is because we get a nice half-step resolution. If I play the minor 4 like this, that note up top, that's the different note. That's the flat 3, the note that makes this chord minor. That is a note that's not in the key. But look where it moves when we eventually go back to the G, the 1 chord. I'll play the G like this. Look at that B string. Watch the minor 4. Hear that note? Now listen to the G chord. That's a half step move. The minor 4 has this note, the 1 chord has this note. So a little half step move there at the end. It's especially effective if you play a normal 4, minor 4, and then 1, because you have 2 half step motions happening. Here's the normal 4 chord. Here's the minor 4 chord. half step back, here's the 1 chord. Half step back. So if you play that progression, or if you hear that progression, somewhere in the arrangement, somewhere in the voicing will be a half step movement down and then another half step movement down to eventually resolve to the 1. Again, this pulling of your ear sound, this setup sound comes from half step movements, and that's exactly what's happening right here. So that's one instance of resolving out of the minor 4 chord, but there's another one that's not as common, but you hear it fairly frequently, and that is moving to the 6 chord, which in this case would be E minor. Let me just play that for you so you can see what that sounds like. So 1, 5, 4, minor 4, and then to 6, right? It's a different pull, but I would say equally effective pull depending on the circumstances. And if you're wondering why, it has to do with the relationship between a 1 chord and a 6 chord in a key. In this case, that would be G is the 1 and E minor is the 6. Those chords are very, very similar in their note structure, and those chords, I would say the 6 and the 1, or I should say the 6 chord is the only chord in the key that has the exact same pentatonic scale as the 1 chord. No other chord has the same notes. The 4 chord's pentatonic scale is not the same as the 1 chord. The 2 chord's pentatonic scale is not the same as the 1 chord. The only chord that has the same pentatonic scale as the 1 is the 6 chord, which means that they are closely related, hence the term relative major and minor. I'm sure you've heard that before. That's always the relationship between a 1 chord and a 6 chord. And what that means for our purposes here is anything you do to set up a 1 chord will generally work in the same way setting up a 6 chord. So any chord that you have that flows really well into a 1 chord, like the minor 4, can also generally work moving to the 6 chord because the 6 and the 1 are so similar and so closely related. So yeah, that's the sound. It's really pretty straightforward, and you're going to hear so many artists do it. You're going to hear the Beatles do it. You're going to hear Journey do it. You're going to hear Green Day do it. You're going to hear Protest the Hero do it. You're going to hear Post Malone do it. So many people, thousands of artists use this sound to add some drama or suspense to their progression. And speaking of Post Malone, he has a song called Stay that I would check out because every verse of that song ends with a minor 4, taking you into the next part, the chorus. And guess what? Every chorus of that song, I think, ends with a minor 4, taking you into the next verse. So every large section of that song ends with a minor 4, prepping your ears for the next section. It's very, very, I would say, well done usage of that chord. And the interesting thing about that is the chorus ends with a minor 4, and then the verse starts with a normal 4. So there is an example of using a minor 4 and resolving out of it in a way that's not typical, not going to 1, not going to 6. That song in particular is in the key of C, and here's the 4 chord, F major. The choruses end with F minor, and then start with F major. That's how it runs, and it's very effective, I think, especially with the melody that's chosen. So I'll put that link below for you to check out because it's a great use of that minor 4. So anyway, now that we know how the chord is used in a progression, let's talk about how we can create some melodies and generally improvise over the sound in a couple different ways. Okay, so right off the bat, the easiest thing you can do over this minor 4 is just simply play minor pentatonic over that chord. So in this case, we're in the key of G, so the minor 4 is C minor. So we can simply play C minor pentatonic when that chord happens. Really simple. Exactly what you would normally play over a standard minor chord. So I'm going to demonstrate that over a backing track. Now, this track is not exactly the same as the track that you're going to be playing over. This track is just 1, another 1, and then 4, and then minor 4, and then back to 1. Whereas the other track has a couple of the chords. So let's just listen to what this sounds like. Here's the G. C major, pentatonic, minor. Back to G. C minor. Etc., etc. So So that's just straight up minor pentatonic, that whole time not really doing anything fancy, just kind of transitioning to the minor pentatonic sound. Now, it's really important that you don't just simply play minor pentatonic and then once you're in that minor pentatonic, you're thinking, great, I'm good to go, I'm doing it right. It doesn't end there. You have to make sure that when you play that minor pentatonic, you're getting out of it back into the chord that is going to happen afterwards, which in this case is G, and in the track will be sometimes G and sometimes E minor, or E suspended, at least in that track. So what I mean by that is playing your minor pentatonic ideas and then finding a way to seamlessly transition back into that chord. And the easiest way to do that is finding chord tones of the C minor nearby chord tones of the next chord, let's say G. So for instance, if I play the root of C minor, so that's like right here, you know, here's my C minor pentatonic. There's my root. Notice where that note is. It's the 4 of the key, and it's 1 fret up from the 3rd of G, that B. So if I happen to be playing an idea in C minor pentatonic and I end there, something like that, I know I can immediately go like this. And that'll take me back into the G, and it will sound smooth and connected. Another one is one that we mentioned earlier, the 3rd of the C minor, which is right here. Right, 1, 2, flat 3, because we're playing minor, of course. There it is in the chord. This note is 1 fret up from the 5 of G. Right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's, again, right next to it. So if we hit that note, I can just move back a fret, and it'll take me right back to that G. So I'm going to demonstrate that exact move right here over the track so you can see what it sounds like. There's G. C major, watch this, really simple. See that? That was the root of C. I just sat on it and then moved back, resolved to the G. Now I'm going to do the other one. C major, C minor. Right? Now I'm kind of playing in not the most musical way. I'm just kind of sitting on the note, but I'm trying to hit home that point where you play that note and you can recognize, okay, this note simply moves back a fret from C minor into the next chord, G in this case, or E minor. It kind of works over both depending on what you're doing in the track. So that's really what I mean. You can practice the sound all you want, but all the crazy licks that you can play, none of them matter if you're not smoothly transitioning back into the chord, if you're not landing on your feet. It's kind of like a gymnast. If you're a gymnast and you can do 20 flips in the air perfectly, but then you land on your face at the end of it, none of those flips matter anymore, right? You have to land your ideas if you really want them to hit home. So very important that you're not just spending time getting into the C minor, you're spending time definitely getting out of the C minor, or the minor 4, I should say, into whatever that next chord happens to be. So super important. So honestly, you could pretty much stop this video at this point and just start practicing this and get a lot of really great sounds and a lot of mileage out of this idea. But if you're curious in regards to some other things that you can do, some other options, that's what we're about to get into. So before we start, just remember C minor pentatonic, or the minor pentatonic of that minor 4, whatever key you're in, just make sure you're transitioning in and out of it smoothly. Now let's talk about some other things that we can do in regards to this sound. So we have to ask ourselves, where does this minor 4 sound come from? Why does it work? Why are we doing it in the first place? Why does it sound good? Why can't we do something else, a minor of something else? Well, the reason why, when we hit this minor 4 chord, we're actually temporarily changing keys for the length of that chord. So you might be thinking, okay, we're changing to C minor. Not quite. We're actually changing to G minor, which is the minor version of the key that we're in, right? The key that we're in, at least of this track, is G major. When we play that C minor, we are implying G minor. C minor just happens to be a chord from the key of G minor that we're using to point our ears in the direction of G minor, right? So, of course, there are multiple chords in G minor that we could use instead of C minor, instead of this minor 4. So what we're going to do is experiment with all of the other sounds that exist in the key of G minor, and we're going to play all of those sounds during this minor 4 chord and see what kind of sounds we get. So the first thing we have to think about is, what are the other sounds in G minor that kind of relate? It's not really related. It's parallel minor, if you want to get technical about it. Parallel minor to the original key of the track, which is G major. How can we think about these sounds in G minor? I look at it like this. Minor keys are almost always built off of the sixth chord of the key that you're in, right? So for instance, if I'm thinking about the key of A minor, let's say, I think about A minor as 6, that's like the main chord of the key of C. Minor chords are almost always built on, or not minor chords, but minor keys are always built off of the 6 of the key, the larger major key that you're in. So that's what I'm going to look at here. G minor is going to be the 6th chord of this larger key that we're in. So what are the other sounds? G minor is 6. A minor 7 flat 5 is 7. That's another sound we can play. B flat major is 1. That's a sound we can play. C minor is 2. That's kind of the sound that we're already doing right here. D minor is 3. E flat major is 4. F major is 5, or we can play F dominant, because 5 chords are dominant, and then we're right back to our original G minor. So those are all of the sounds that live in that key of G minor, or where G minor is the 6th chord. So I'm going to run through all of those, or at least the ones that I think are the best, and you can see that they all more or less work over this sound. So I can just continue playing C minor pentatonic, but I can also sneak into some of these other sounds. So check this out. I'm just going to run through a couple of them. So let's do, how about this? G minor. When the C minor chord happens, that minor 4, I'm going to play G minor. I'm going to straight up play like minor pentatonic. Just G minor, and then I'm going to play G major as we go back into the rest of the track. So check this out. There's the G major. Still G major. C major. G minor. Right back into G. So that was straight up G minor pentatonic I played right there. So we've got 2 potential minor pentatonics we can play. We can play C minor over that. We can also play G minor over that. What's another one we can play? How about the A minor 7 flat 5? A little bit different sound if you're not used to it. That's like a minor chord with a flat 5. So I'm going to play this figure up there. It's kind of the most blatant figure. Right, that's just A's, 1, flat 3, flat 5, flat 7, and then again, 1, flat 3, flat 5, flat 7. That's the sound. Let's see what that sounds like during the minor 4 chord. G major. C major. Here we go. Right? Pretty nice sound, a little bit different color. It's got the same vibe as what we've been doing this whole time, but a little bit different because the notes are slightly different. What's another sound? How about straight up B flat major? I'm going to play B flat major pentatonic. How about this? Just going to do that run right there during the minor 4, of course. There's our G. Here we go. So notice, again, pretty cool sound, a different sound altogether. And at the same time, notice that I'm also always focusing on not just playing the sound, but getting out of it back into the G major. So I'm always looking for those notes that are going to slide right back into G. I'm playing a lot of B, the 3rd of G, and I'm kind of letting my ear guide me as I'm doing that. That's honestly what you should do as well when you're playing this. Just let your ear guide you. Your ear is going to make mistakes once in a while, but the more you do this, you'll start to lock in to those chord tones of that following chord, and you'll be able to hear them before they happen. So just gotta practice it. That's all it is. So that was B flat. We played C minor. How about E flat major? That one could be kind of cool. Let's try that. So when the C minor happens, E flat major. That's the G. C major, E flat major, right? Again, different sound, but pretty cool. Now, E flat major is not that different because it's really the same exact thing as C minor pentatonic, but you can still get some of those specific kind of major pentatonic licks that you've been practicing, but play it in a totally different context to get some cool sounds. Now, let me play one more. Actually, I'm going to play D minor. I'm not a huge fan of this one, but let's just experiment, see what it sounds like. G right there. Here comes D minor. I mean, I don't know. That was kind of cool. I actually kind of like that, the way I played it right there, at least. That was just straight up D minor pentatonic, just walking back and, of course, trying to end on the right note of the next chord. So also, another thing I want you to realize, notice what I'm actually playing when I'm playing these sounds. Bare bones, really nothing. I'm just playing like pentatonic or arpeggios, just like bare bones stuff. I'm actually purposefully not playing anything super complex. Like I'm not playing a super complex minor idea or super complex major idea, because the sound is already complex by me playing these chords that are, of course, not in the key. So I can just kind of let the general idea kind of lift the heavy note weight for me and just play the normal stuff, and it will sound good either way. Of course, you can definitely experiment with more complex sounds, but I would start really simple like I'm doing right here. Let's try the last one. How about F dominant 7? This is actually one of my favorites. Check this out. G major again. Here comes the C right here. F dominant. Etc. So again, listen to these little flourishes, right? And I'm honestly not really playing that interesting material. I'm just kind of running through the notes just so you can get all the colors at the same time. But you can really go crazy with these sounds. You can just kind of pick one that you really like and play that one every time. Like if you really like that F dominant during the C minor, you can just play that every time it happens to get some really great ideas, especially if you're already practicing some dominant 7th ideas in your normal practice. You can apply it in this different context. And again, the reason why all of these sounds work is because all of these sounds exist in the key that we are implying when that C minor happens, which is G minor. And again, that's why it sounds so smooth, because it's definitely different. We're playing G minor and G major, of course, which is the key of the track. They're not the same thing, but they're similar enough so that it doesn't pull your ear like completely in a totally different direction. It still sounds familiar enough so that it can still work. It's not like we're going like across the universe to this totally different key. We're still pretty much staying in that G area. We're just playing some different notes because we're implying G minor, and we can use any sound that we want. Another kind of interesting thing when you're doing this, let's say if you're writing and you have a chord progression, this is of course a minor 4. If you want, you can use any of those other chords that I played instead. So you could just straight up just not play the minor 4, and you could play like A minor 7 flat 5, or you can play E flat major, and it will give the same vibe, even though the chord is totally different. Again, because we're just simply implying G minor, the key, during that moment, just to give it that little bit of an extra unique kind of eyebrow raising color. So you could do a lot of really cool stuff with this. So yeah, that's a ton of material right there that you can mess around with. The last one that I want to talk about is an interesting one, because sometimes you'll come across a version of the minor 4 that actually calls for something totally different. And what this sound is, I look at it like this. It's a mixture of C minor and G major. Okay, remember, G major is the key that we're in. And there's this core group of notes that are so strong in G major, and that's the 1, 2, 3 of G major. So if I just play that like right here, for instance, I've kind of been playing that this whole time, actually. Listen to these 3 notes. Right, when you hear those 3 notes, it's like the most majory sound that you can play, right? That 1, 2, 3, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to play the 1, 2, 3 of G, so G, A, B, while still playing the other notes of C minor. So what were the notes of C minor? C is 1, D is 2, E flat is 3, right? Flat 3 because we're playing minor. F is 4, G is 5. But instead of going through the normal scale, I'm going to play G and then A natural and then B natural. So what is my new sound right here, my new shape? It's C minor, 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, normal 6, normal 7. Okay, let me play that figure. Okay, so if Maybe you play this sound already. Hopefully you do. This is what's more commonly known as melodic minor. So C melodic minor. It's a minor scale with a normal 6 and a normal 7. Now, some minors have normal 6s. That's not that weird. But the normal 7 is actually not a note that ever exists naturally, at least, over any minor context. So we're kind of putting it in there, even though it never naturally exists. But it sounds really awesome because, again, it's just that mixture of new and familiar. The C minor is out of the key. That's new. But the 1, 2, 3, the G, A, B, or the 5, natural 6, natural 7 of C, that's the familiar sound that we've been playing this whole time. So it's like a mixture. We still have those strong notes of G major, but we're also getting the colors of C minor at the same time, okay? So again, this sound is melodic minor. This is kind of, I think this is sort of where melodic minor kind of started. It kind of came from this context right here, this classic minor 4, because this is a sound that's been used for hundreds of years, so I'm assuming that's where it came from. Or at least that's where I hear it most of the time. So I'm going to play this sound now over this. It's going to sound different because remember, we're not playing straight minor. We're playing a different type of minor with a normal 6 and a normal 7. Let's see what this sounds like. There's the G. I'm going to play that classic. That's the 1, 2, 3, right? Here comes the sound. Right? It's really colorful and it's really melodic. That's probably why it's called melodic minor, because we get those different notes of C minor, but then we retain that strong core group of 3 notes of G major. Right? I can even sit on those notes during the minor chord, during that C minor, and it will sound pretty cool. Let me try that. Here we go. Watch this. Right? So notice what I was doing right there. I was really hammering on these 3 notes. That's the 5, natural 6, natural 7 of C minor, or the 1, 2, 3 of G. But I was also sneaking in this note. That's the flat 3 of C minor. So I'm getting both notes. I'm getting the strong core 3 notes of the major key, of the key that we're in, plus that one different note of C minor. Right? Really cool sounds. You can even get like little chord shapes out of it like this. Right? If you ever hear those sounds, that's what that is. Super colorful. It's one of my favorite sounds, and there's, of course, we're using it right here, but there are many, many other uses of this melodic minor sound that we're definitely going to talk about in the future. Very important if you ever want to play certain styles of music, because they heavily use this sound. But that's something I'd like you to experiment, and the best way to practice with this sound is just simply target those important notes. And those important notes, what they really are is C minor's flat 3, right? The note that really makes it minor, and that natural 7, retaining that note, the strong note from the major key. Play both of those notes and really sit on them, and you'll get some really great sounds. Let's check it out. G, there's G again. C major. Here we go. So right there, I did a little bit of a mixture. I played some of that one run right here with straight up that melodic minor sound, but then I dipped into more of the standard minor fare when I was up here. You can clearly do that over this track. You can easily do that over this track because the chords that are happening allow you to do either one, right? They're vague enough where you can play either sound. You can do the melodic minor like we just talked about, or the standard minor. Either one will work. Now, sometimes certain songs will play a specific type of minor chord that will kind of, not force you, but it will encourage you to play one or the other. So sometimes you'll actually hear the minor 4 have one of those color notes from the melodic minor. Like you might hear this, right? That's a C minor with a natural 6. Or you might hear C minor with a natural 7. Or you might hear something like this, both of them. Something like that. You'll definitely hear that. And if you do notice those notes happening, you should probably also play those. So that would mean you would also play that minor with those raised 6 and 7s. And then on the other hand, sometimes you'll hear a minor 4 like this, like a straight minor 7 or minor 9 or something like that, and then resolve to the G. And if you hear that, then you should probably play the pentatonic versions, because the pentatonic version has those notes in it, right? Just kind of whatever minor pentatonic sign you want to do. Again, this is totally up to you. You could just say, screw it, I'm going to play whatever I want, however I want, regardless of the context. And if you do it, you could definitely make it work. You just have to kind of experiment a little bit with it. So keep your ears and your eyes open for which type of minor 4 happens, because sometimes it'll be a standard, just minor triad. And if that's the case, you can do whatever you want. That's kind of what this track is doing, sort of. But other times you'll have minor 4s that have specific notes that maybe you should also play in your lead. So that's pretty much it. I'm a huge fan of this sound. I think it's really useful. So many people use it, like I mentioned earlier. The best thing you can do, you can play over this track, of course, but you can also search around for songs that you're already playing and try to improvise over those songs and really think about when those minor 4s happen. There's a bunch of really popular songs that do it, and you could just use those songs as backing tracks. That's one thing I like to do. So anyway, hope this stuff makes sense. If you enjoy this type of instructional material, feel free to check out my Patreon at the link below, and I'll see you guys in the next one.